Hello there. You're
Good
on. Yep.
morning for one more minute.
Yes, exactly. One more minute. Are you guys still in blistering heat?
It's 92 blistering heat.
Yes.
For this time of year, it's kind of hot. So
Yeah. I've been having a lot of wildlife activity in my yard. So I set up a trail cam. It's been very exciting.
I don't need to set up a trail cam to see all the activity in my yard. They march through my yard during the day in front of my
Oh,
window.
they're sassy about it. We had a fox den under my neighbor's shed, which is like in on my driveway. And then apparently while I wasn't here, we had a visit from a bobcat that had lunch. And I've never seen a bobcat, and I'm so upset that I missed it. So hopefully my trail cam is going to catch it.
Bobcats are pretty elusive. I've only seen one in my whole life.
Right, I know. So
And it was moving at about 40 miles an hour. Ooh.
yeah, yeah, I can confirm that there's still some fox. We still have I have a fox. They're not all foxes have, or lunch, but some of them definitely did not make it. Hello, Christy. How are you?
Hi, Keela. I am great. How are you?
Good. I saw there's some exciting things happening in your industry.
There is some movement, yet more movement. Another domino has fallen in place to kind of um, add validity to what we're doing. So, yeah, and other opportunities are coming up. So, very happy. Yes, thanks.
Amazing.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, Christy. How are you?
Very good. How are you?
I'm a happy camper today.
Oh, I'm so glad. Is there any particular reason?
Um, no, not particularly. I had some
Even
just
better.
a lot of good stuff going on and nothing terrible happening. So that's awesome.
It is awesome. And the conference, how was the conference last week or the week
Uh,
before?
the
It was last week.
conferences are going really well. I think that we've had good feedback from EIC and also Focusrite.
Oh, good. Excellent.
All right.
I do want to give an update. I had talked to a couple months ago about inviting my brother-in-law, who works in the health industry, to be, to attend with us. And as predicted, he is in the middle of a big career and personal family move across the country. So he's not had an opportunity yet, but he said that when his calendar opens up, he will let me know.
Very good.
And we're getting Steve on. We'll jump into our kickoff and official agenda stuff in just a second here. Okie dokie. All right, I'm gonna chat the meeting notes on our Hyperledger wiki here for anybody who wants to follow along or needs links to anything that I'm going to reference here. But today is June 13th, and we're very happy to have our familiar faces here with us today. So just as a reminder, we're under the umbrella of HITRUST policies by Hyperledger as well as the code of conduct. So you've all heard that spiel before. I'm going to leave it at that for today. There's links in case anybody has issues or questions on what those policies mean, and we can jump in. So Chrissy, you shared an update. Is there anything else anybody wants to add before we just do a quick where are we now?
No, unless there's anything specific you want to hear about.
We'd always be happy to hear what's going on in your space, but uh, if there's nothing, so if you do have anything exciting about what sort of new developments are happening in your universe, happy to hear them.
Okay, well, predominantly it's laws. When laws or lawsuits happen, they seem to be falling in favor of managing health information, biometric, biomechanical tracking, EQ, other types of information and data collected from athletes. And so the most recent was a settlement announced in a case called House versus NCAA, where athletes in college, student athletes, can now be compensated. So that has actually, I'd already seen an uptick in interest in what I'm doing since January, but definitely since that settlement was announced, have had some more traction, and in fact, had some great conversations with one of your board members, Indicio's board members, I should say, and a lot of support there, and also opportunity to work with a major university in kind of progressing our ideas, progressing with our market, growing the market, and making more headway in the athlete data market. So things are moving forward, and I've had some other potential investors interested in what we're doing as well, because of the movement in sports in general, women's sports, and collegiate sports, name, image, likeness, AI, acts, additional privacy legislation. There's just a lot going on in the space that's fueling dollars earmarked for sports and sports technology. So that's great for my business.
Yeah, and is that those sort of environmental changes and how that relates to the use of verifiable credentials in your industry is really about because um correct me here, but I think where the intersection is that because that now becomes an industry where there is financial impact and where there is, let's say, higher stakes, that the privacy of that data is more important because it's a little bit less under the cover of NCAA. Is that kind of how that is generating the buzz around
You know,
verifiable credentials?
that's a great question. Really what's creating the buzz is just I have been evangelizing it for the last few years, as you know, and indicating to people that I think this is a key component in how we can manage the privacy and IP rights in data in a new model that's emerging. So it's really just me, kind of going out with my trumpet and saying, I think this is a key way. And I can just give you one short, quick example is FIF Pro is one of the largest, maybe the largest players association organizations in the world. And in my conversations with them, they a year ago, a little over a year ago, decided that they wanted a player centric database or system that could help athletes manage their privacy better and protect them under GDPR in the EU. And that's great because they're the farthest along of the professional associations that I'm aware of in doing that. However, they're trying to comply with GDPR, which was released 8 or 9 years ago. I can't even remember now, maybe longer. So they're very, backward looking, and in the industry, sports industry, people are usually looking at databases. Can we grow databases and share data? And they're not really fully appreciating what decentralized identity and blockchain can really do. And to me, it's very forward looking. And it's how are we going to comply and get compliance done in the future, and not, oh yeah, 10 years ago there was a law and California has privacy law. There are a lot of other laws that apply to data, and athlete data that's monetized is a new category. In the past, you have anonymized data that could be sold in the market, but not data specific to an individual. So it's really a new market and it's really evolving. And so I think what's new about it is just that the NCAA case and settlement is the latest in a number of dominoes that have fallen since 2018 to really indicate the need for what we are doing at Honor Data Rights Management. And we choose to champion decentralized identity because we think it's forward looking and can allow compliance and transactions in real time. And we haven't seen another technology that we believe could do that as efficiently and as effectively and cost effectively.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, great. And just in case anybody's listening who doesn't know the acronym NCAA, it's the Collegiate Athletic Association in the US, just for long-term acronym clarification here. That is all very interesting, Christy.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for
Thanks.
sharing.
Thanks for asking. You're welcome.
Okay. And welcome, Trevor and Mike. So in our last couple of meetings, we have gone through some updates to workflows, and I realized I'm not sharing my screen, but I am taking notes and can share my screen so everybody can see where I am. For those of you who are visual. So we had been working on these workflows, which are sort of ways to use an identity credential to help bridge some workflows in in this case a healthcare space, and managing the person through that workflow or the handoffs across the an interaction with a healthcare facility. And the goal of this is to sort of reposition some of our previous white paper write-ups to be a little bit more neutral, but also specific enough to paint the picture for where they might be applicable. So we have these updated workflows. We did still have a couple of questions, which are highlighted in orange here around some optional things that might be leveraged by the workflow. And in our last meeting, we had outlined a couple of things we wanted to make sure we had jotted down to revisit. So, so I'm not sure if we want to dive into any one of these today. I'm kind of leaving this a little bit open to discussion about the best use of our time. We can revisit these workflows and make sure that they're ready for Trevor and him to be able to pick up into some language edits around supporting write-up of those, or if we want to dive into sort of which additional things we've listed here might be critical to getting the next round of documentation ready. Let me pause. See, maybe Ken, do you have an opinion, or Trevor?
I don't have an opinion right now.
So we could
Okay.
take a look at some of the red bits that I think that we're pretty close. I think we should take the diagrams that are complete and hand those over to Trevor, and then maybe we can focus on one of the areas that needs clarification today and see if we can get that to a state of completeness as well.
Sounds good. Okay, so just so that we have context again, I'll just start us off at the top. We have a new patient created where there's a mobile digital wallet. We specified that because, as you saw, there is sort of the what do we do for people who don't have a wallet as a future context. So this specifies, right? And it goes through whether or not the practice is collecting data digitally or via paper, and then the interactions between the patient and that practice in order to create that initial credential for a patient known to a practice. So that's where this ends. The system creates and issues a completed credential for the person. I'm skipping that one because it doesn't have any open questions on it. We're going to go to our first one that does have a question, which is scheduling an appointment for an in-person care setting. So you're at the front desk, you just finished your initial visit, maybe you need to come back. And so the patient would present or person would present their credential to the front desk again, instead of having to shout their PII across the waiting room. then is there a credential? Did that credential pull up a record? It should, because in theory, in my scenario, they're walking out the door, they've already been seen. So yes, it should pull it up. The front desk would then work on coordinating when can they come back. They would land a time and schedule that appointment. And we have these optional ones, which are that the front desk could send a message with the appointment details, or they could send an appointment credential, right? Because if you have the credential for that, you could effectively move toward a kind of closed loop referral tracking system using those credentials. So these were sort of optional.
Yeah, I don't think that there's
I might put them side by side because they're kind of and or optionals. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
was going to say it doesn't seem like they are unanswered questions. I think they're just simply bonuses where you don't have to do that, but they're good ideas.
I agree. I guess I could make them, instead of orange, we could make them kind of gray so that it's like maybe if you want.
Yeah, because if we have ones that are orange because they're questions, then that would be, the different encoding would be useful.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
Are they,
Oops.
is there one we recommend over the other? Or are they both just optional?
You could do one or the other or both, seems like to me,
Or neither?
or neither.
Or neither. Do you want me to indicate or nothing? Done. Just grab this guy.
Yeah, if you've got an end symbol, then we can use it here as well. Yeah, all right, we're done.
Well, actually, the end comes after any of the three paths, right?
Well, it's an and or any of those three paths.
No, I'm saying you can go directly to end, or you go to end after.
Yep.
Um,
After you do these things.
yeah.
That was your point, right? Like this.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, excellent. I'm just gonna copy this guy because it's on the next page also. Any other comments on this page? Now we do have this, like, if they don't have a matching credential, so they show up in the office and they say, "Hey, here's my credential," and it doesn't link to anything. We've kind of put that as like, okay, that's not a happy path, so we've put it aside. I think that this would generally mean they have to register the person in their EMR, right? Or maybe they can accept the credential to create a patient that doesn't already bring up a chart. But we did, on all of these flows, kind of pop that out and say, well, talk about that later. That could be a conversation for now as well. So maybe what we'll do, let's go here. I'm just going to make the same change we just did here. This is for a phone scheduling of an appointment. And I'm just going to reiterate what we did on the other slide. And then we will jump back to that point I was just making. So this is the person calls the office. So do they already have a secure connection? Right, for them to be able to know who's who, that it is the person they say they are. If not, then the office is going to send either an email or an SMS to establish a connection. If they do, then they would remotely request the credential exchange and then go through the scheduling. This one actually doesn't have the scenario where the patient does not have a credential. So it assumes that let me make a note here. This one assumes that they have a verifiable credential and that they know the patient. which we may need to discuss.
Does this one assume that they have a patient credential or assume that they already have a patient credential and a relationship with the office?
Well, it assumes that they have a patient credential. If they don't have a relationship with the office, we have at least that they would set up the connection, but we don't have what if is the practice inheriting, what if they don't have a record for the patient?
Hmm.
It assumes that they know the patient in some capacity because they have an email or SMS right there. Like it's not like a totally unknown patient. That is in the new patient creation model, but we don't have where they schedule an appointment remotely for an unknown patient. This is a known patient. Let me clarify that here. Known patient. Oops.
Yeah, it seems like you're going to need a different flow for an unknown patient.
Yes, it is very different. So I agree with
You
you. It's
can't shoehorn that one into this. You have to have a separate one, I think.
agreed. Okay, and maybe we want to do this box actually leads to that flow that can help support that scenario. Right? The practice doesn't know whether it's in person or via phone. There's something that's going to need to happen. Um, again, this one assumes that they have a credential. This is an in-person scheduling of an appointment. So there's some assumption that I'll put that here also that patient has credential and is known.
Is that a safe assumption because people don't usually walk into the office and then schedule an
Correct.
appointment and then turn around and walk out?
Yeah, I think if they did that, that would follow the new patient creation, right? They'd go to this flow first and then they'd schedule the appointment.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like an order, a flow to this, and we'll have to kick out some of those exceptional scenarios. Okay, so maybe before we come back to this, so we covered new patient creation, we covered the scheduling of an appointment in person, where we've discussed the known patient remote appointment scheduling. And just before we go back and dive into those in more detail, we have the checking in of an appointment. So the patient scans the credential at the front desk. Do they match? We have again that pop out to say if the credential and the person don't match, what happens? If they do check out, then the front desk would check them in for their appointment. They might ask them, has anything changed about your demographic data where the credential might be stale? And if the answer is yes, the patient would provide their updated info. The front desk would update it in their EMR and issue a new credential to the patient. We have this question about if that same organization that's updating their credential is the one that issued the credential, then they could revoke the previous credential and replace it with the updated demographics. If they did not issue the credential, which we do have as a question, then they're not revoking. Nothing's happening. So now the person has two identity credentials, one from issuer number one and one from issuer number two, which is this agency. So that was sort of a room for some discussion. Obviously, if nothing needs to change, then they wouldn't update the credential and they'd bypass that for the patient to be seen. Did this spark anything for anybody in terms of what needs to happen with multiple identity credentials? At this no here.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You could have the patient, when they receive a new credential, an updated identity credential, be prompted to say, do you want to share this new one with the organization that issued you your previous one? So you could have that be communicated by the patient back to the first organization, right?
And that technically, Ken, how that would work is because they got a credential with the same schema, the wallet would say, wait a minute, now you have more than one of these.
Yeah. So you could say, hey, I already got one of those, and I've got an updated one with the new information in it. Maybe I should notify the first credential issuer that I've got a new one and share it with them.
And is that the wallet that would do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they already have a relationship with that first issuer. So that
Right.
allows for a mechanism for them to share it. It doesn't have to go back through it doesn't have to go through the specialist office that got the referral. It could be done by the patient to say, hey, I've updated my information. Here's an updated copy. Do you want to see it?
Yep. And that just means that the onus is on the wallet to get that logical check in place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the patient to consent to sharing it. And that's the only, I think it would be technically quite easy to implement and not burdensome on either of the organizations. I think it takes the load off of that integration and puts it back in the decentralized fashion with the patient. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I was getting messaged from something important in a different channel, so I missed the first part of your suggestion there. You're saying something about the patient indicating that they've got new
So
data?
if they've updated new data, so it says, does anything change in your patient record? And they say, yep. And then they give them the new information, like my address is new.
Mm-hmm.
And the organization that they're visiting today updates their credential, but they weren't the original issuer, so they can't revoke it. So they can say, I'm just going to give you a new one. And the patient's wallet can say, oh, I've got an updated one of these. I've already got one of these from my other doctor's office. I'm going to notify that other doctor's office, the previous doctor's office, that I have a new credential. So I'm going to tell them that I have one and share it with them. And they can update their other stuff and um, issue a new updated one or whatever they want to do with it. But then the records are all kept up to date.
Yeah,
The
you
wallet
could.
would have to know that. The wallet would have to be coded to say, wait a minute, I can only my rule something about a rule in the wallet would have to say you should only have one of these to issue that check.
I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't have more than one. It's just that it should be aware of updates to say, um, you could have one per office if you needed to, but if there's an update to this particular credential type, then the previous ones should either be, um, should be revoked and reissued, or at least the parties notified or something like that. So.
Yeah, I guess my concern with that being logic in the wallet, but I don't know how else you would do it, is that, in a lot of cases, people are like bringing their own wallet. And so then that's logical rules, governance, excuse me, I forget what we're calling that code now. That would have to be in the wallet to say, wait a minute, you should only have more than, or you should, in theory, only have one of these to prompt the user with a question.
There's no restriction on having more than one. It's just that it's as a courtesy that you're notifying the previous organization that some of your demographics have changed. Your address has changed, your phone number, whatever.
Right. But the only tool that can do that, correct me if I'm wrong here, is the wallet. Because it's the only one that knows about there being more than one.
Right. And so the flows and the system will still function, but it's a bonus. It's a nice thing to have. If your wallet supports it, then it improves things, but it doesn't make everything fall down if you don't have that feature in a wallet. If you're using one that's, if you're using a different wallet than most of the patients in that system, you'll be okay.
It's an optional step, is what we're saying, right?
Right.
Mhm.
So we turn that into a gray thingy again.
Yep. Oh no, not that way though. And it would be that it sends credential, up new credential to other issuer, right? If the patient says yes. Wallet holder, sorry, to be more neutral. The wallet holder says, yes, please update the other entity. In theory, you'd already have that connection because the other entity sent you the credential. Is that a
Correct.
safe assumption? Okay.
Yes, you do have a connection to them, and if you don't, you can reestablish one because you have their DID as the issuer.
Okay. Excellent. And then the patient waits to be seen. Okay, super. I'm gonna turn off my camera because my internet's being weird. Alrighty. I just need a little more real estate and I'll get this cleaned up. Okay, any other comments on this flow? Making silence as no. And that looks pretty good. Okie dokie then. So we could go, those were the ones that we had finished. So we can, with our remaining time, either dive into what should happen if the patient and the credential don't match. I think that some of that is policy, so maybe not critical. And then we just talked about, well, what if a patient tries to schedule an appointment like as an unknown person, they're not in the office. Would the credentials be involved there and at what capacity? And we also have the non-digital option we need to talk about to cover the health equity aspect of credentials. Did I lose you all? Oh, no, still here. Okay.
I think that the non-patient by phone discussion is probably pretty short because
This guy.
the establishment of the identity credential, we're working on the assumption that the person in the office is able to see them, right? Like visually, physically see the person and say, yep, we can match this to an identity credential. So if we go to
Correct.
okay, so if you're making that assumption that you're going to see the person before you issue them a valid medical ID type credential, then if they are remote and they don't have a credential, there's not really anything you can do at that moment, other than to say, yeah, we'll set up some time for you. But when you get here, the very first thing you're going to have to do is a new patient process.
And so I think what we're saying, I think the questions I'm just gonna, and my internet's being a little funny, so sorry if I'm choppy, hopefully not. So I think what we're saying is that the front desk generally creates a light patient record. Because they have to register, you have to schedule your appointment against some patient chart. So typically speaking, they would create some kind of patient record, and then be able to schedule the appointment. And so I think what we're saying is that all is happening just like kind of in the old school way. Is that what you're suggesting, Mike?
Yeah, if you've got them on the phone and you don't have a credential or a record yet or something like that, then all you've got is the traditional by phone methods.
Yes. And I think that in this case, they like really don't care about identity, not to make too many assumptions here, but they have no skin in the game, right? They haven't provided any care. They're not billing for anything. They don't have any medical data associated with you. You are simply just calling to schedule.
Right.
And so if you never show up, they don't care.
They only care as much as they care about anybody missing their appointment. So yeah.
Um, and so there is maybe a nuance, and sorry to kick off another offshoot here, but there is the nuance that the patient was referred for this service, right? So let's just, in a real world scenario, your general practitioner refers you to an oncologist. That might include the transfer of some medical data so that that oncologist or specialist has a starting place of who are you, that you're coming in, what's the background. That's more of like a warm handoff, and that might be even a little bit different than that's a referral, not scheduling of a new appointment. So I'm going to just mark, maybe I'll put that in our comments over here. Referral
You're
slash
saying this
warm.
workflow is skipping the referral part. We're
Yeah, this
just
is like I
doing,
cold called an office and I need an appointment, please.
yeah. If it's a referral, they may have a nice patient credential or they might not, depending on who they're being referred from, right?
That is correct. So it may be that the referral does include some technical exchange of data, right? So for example, if I'm the primary office and I'm referring, I may hand off your medical data. We should think about how that sharing of the credential, like maybe that office can request that to share the patient's identity credential with the receiving practice specialist. Because then it's really, I think in that scenario, my thought process is about that workflow. And part of this is we'll get a resource on here to validate these workflows for us, is that if I'm doing a referral with that warm handoff, it's much more like the scheduling of an appointment in person, right? They're gonna say, okay, you have, just to stay with my oncologist example, you have cancer, you need this follow-up, whatever the case may be. Let's get you in. We recommend, here's a really good oncologist. Do you want to schedule an appointment with them? Like, let's get that going. And so in this scenario it's sort of a new appointment, but a referral where the front desk may ask, can I forward your information and ask that. So can you build, I don't think you can build a connection through a third party. Somebody correct me if I'm like down a rabbit hole that doesn't make a lot of sense in this space.
You could, I was going to say you could do an introduction, basically.
And what does that mean?
The referring
Technically.
office could request a invitation from the oncologist and say, I'm going to display this to my patient and allow them to connect to you.
So it would be front desk presents QR code for
From the
referral,
from
sorry,
the from the
specialist
specialist.
referred to provider. Okay, and then and then the patient would scan it and agree to
And
share
then they share, and that way the patient always stays stuck in the middle. They stay in control. They stay where they're the one sharing, they're the one consenting.
Okay, cool. And then, because then that also, they may or may not have, we're going to leave because there's so many flavors of this. We're going to leave it be about, it's kind of then up to the new practice to, now they've established a connection and they can exchange with the new practice. So in this case, there's sort of practice 1 and practice 2. And we are in a rabbit hole, so I will get us out of here in 1 second.
Thank you.
But it is an
It
interesting
is
one.
manageable. It is manageable, and it is in a way that doesn't change the basic assumptions of patient in control of their data, patient in control of the relationship, but it allows for referral to occur, introduction to occur.
Yeah, and I think the idea of this handoff is like getting more and more press, let's say, these days. And so I just want to make sure it's kind of accounted for. So in this case, the office reaches out / sends message to schedule appointment. Because this includes establishes connection to referred provider. Just okay. Okay, excellent. I'm getting us out of here. Thank you for humoring my rabbit hole there. And we'll just get this patched. Excellent. Okay. Any other comments?
So there are, 26 variations or flavors of stuff we could do. As soon as we have what we would consider a basic set that would be kind of the minimum viable set, then we should probably freeze on that and see what we can write up or talk about around that. And then if we need to, we can extend stuff like how do you stuff a fire record into a credential that a patient can take with them when they go on their referral or things like that. But I think if we can just establish the patient identity portion of things and cover new patients, referred patients, returning patients, then I think we're in a position to have useful baseline of functionality.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're really close to that. The one scenario that I know, at least in the wild, is really important is what is the what do we do about the non-technical health equity aspect here? People who don't have a way to manage their credentials on a phone. If we don't want to answer that, I think we at least need like a
I
2 or
think
3 sentence thing.
we answer that with a custodial wallet, a cloud custodial wallet. So they have a wallet in the cloud, they can access it via the web, and bada bing, they're ready to go. It's less convenient for them because they have to use a web portal or a web interface to manage their stuff. It's a little bit more complicated, but I think the basic workflows would all still work, except instead of using their phone, they're using a web or a tablet or something like that to access their cloud agent.
So for example, just to finish that thought, that's a great mechanism. We're saying they would have that data in a web, let's say just web-based wallet that doesn't live on their phone but lives in the cloud. The practice might hand the patient a tablet and say, "Here, why don't you access your thing?" And they need to know how to go do that.
Yes.
And then they would have it up, and the scanning and whatever might change just a little bit, but generally speaking, that would then be viable. So the practice would need to be able to have their device they could share with the patient.
Yes.
Okay, that's a great recommendation, at least to get the ball rolling on the complexity there. So that's wonderful. So then I think we're in good shape. I think our next step here is to get some clinical eyes on this to vet what we see as the workflow and handoff. We did that initially just as a reminder, got some feedback on this, but now that we've gotten them a little bit more polished to get that input, and then to your point, to get these handed off to Trevor so he can get to the writing part and we can maybe talk about that fire station because that's critical.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, I've added that
Fantastic.
to the notes as well.
Oh, thanks, Ken.
I think the notes are pretty decent for today. Covered
Okay.
kind of what we talked through. And I think the updates to so I did that while you were, fiddling with the updates to the diagrams. I made notes of what changes we made.
Fantastic. Thank you for doing that. Any other comments? I think otherwise what I see as the next step is clinical review, hand off to Trevor, and then we should have a conversation about fire because I really see that as that's critical, I think. Where are we in time and space and getting to a non-flat, a non-cred?
Well, they maybe are not a non-creds. Maybe they're JSON um, SD JOTs or something like that to hold, or a simple JSON LD credential. I think that those are two potentials I see that are fairly straightforward for handling the fire records. Do you spell fire FHIR? I forgot.
It is
Yes.
FHIR. It's for anybody listening in the future. This is a healthcare standard. It's the newest HL7 international healthcare standard. It is being adopted slowly but surely and picking up pace. Will be critical, I think, to the future of verifiable credentials and interaction with fire.
Yeah, and like Ken said, to support the non-flat formats, there are different credential formats that have different strengths and different weaknesses. So a non-creds is the pinnacle of privacy preservation, but it's a flat format, and that's kind of intrinsic to how it's been put together. But like Ken said, there's some other formats that can handle the non-flat file or data formats. The good thing that's happening is that the Cardea project code base is based upon the open source controller for Cardea, but it sits on top of Ares Cloud Agent Python or Akapi, and Akapi is starting to knock out or deliver support for some of those additional credential types. So with one system, you would have the ability to select and use the appropriate credential type for the job. So anon-creds for the patient identity are a great choice for the selective disclosure and predicate proofs and things like that, the absolute privacy preservation. And then you could use those other formats for moving the medical records around where you're not going to be delivering part of the record very often. You mostly would be saying, I trust this entity to handle this record in its entirety. And so things like a predicate proof where we're only going to reveal the correct existence but not the actual value. With a fire record, that's usually not important. It would be, I'm going to hand you the whole thing, and we don't want it to be a flat format. We want to basically wrap up the fire format with as few changes as possible and hand you the whole thing.
Got it. Do you, either of you, Eberts, are you guys the best ones to kind of give us an update on where that is at a more detailed level in terms of the foundation on and support for the different credentials, or should we plan to get somebody else to come give us that update?
No, I think Ken and I have enough knowledge to be able to say what's going on there. So our team at Indicio works directly with the organizations that maintain Akapi, and our team members are some of the biggest contributors. So it's safe to say that support for JSON LD credentials, which are a fairly rudimentary version of a non-flat record, they don't have, it's all or nothing. There's not really a ton of privacy preservation there. There's support that's been added for that already, but support for the the JSON based formats that offer more privacy preservation is on the roadmap for sometime in the 3 to 6 month kind of range, which is that's a short enough time frame that in the Cardea community you can start looking at, okay, that's basically imminent. What can we do with it? How are we going to adjust for it? By the time Cardea figures out what to do and what to propose and what to talk about, that support will basically be here.
Okay. Okay, so is that are you guys available to delve into maybe the details of that next meeting, or were those the details that you're ready to share?
Those pretty much are the details. I think it would be, we could schedule a meeting where we say, let's have someone who's fairly expert at the nuances of actually how to structure the credential records. Maybe Daniel from our team, for example. We have someone like that come and join us and say, let's talk about, let's maybe look at a sample or fire record and say, how would you convert this into a verifiable credential? What steps would you have to take? What would it look like on the create a credential side? And what would it look like on the, you've received a proof that has this information in it. What would you do on the receiving side? A conversation about the details of handling the actual fire record in and out of a credential, that would be a pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah, and
So
I think very helpful.
I think that it might be useful to get somebody, a world expert in what those fire records look like Steve Davis, to select perhaps a lab, a patient history, a vaccination, or whatever is typically contained in a referral. Let's look at those first and say what might be wanted to be shared, and what does a typical fire record look like, so that people looking at from the credential side can say, oh, that's what the data is going to look like, and we've got to cram that into a credential for it to be shareable. So let's look at what are the common things that need to be shared and their formats, and then how difficult or easy will that be to represent. And I think the conversation could go fairly quickly that way. But I think if we started from Steve or yourself looking at what are the typical records that would be in a referral, that would be a great place to start and to look at it. I do think we want to focus on wrapping up the identity portion of this, so that you have at least a bare minimal set of that functionality, and you could go forward with a solution that just does nothing but identity. And kind of a phase 2 would be, now we're going to transfer records from in a referral situation.
Agreed. I agree with you on that front. Okay, well, I think that sounds good. So, perhaps we can do is work with Trevor offline to get him these diagrams and get his ball moving. Maybe he'll have questions that we'll need to discuss at our next meeting. But if we can move that offline, great. And then we'll talk about fire, whether it's next week or maybe excuse me, not next week, but next meeting in 2 weeks, or the meeting a month from now. Maybe we'll assess what that agenda item is
That sounds
sometime
good.
next week.
If we assess Trevor's feedback and he has a bunch, then we can do that next week. And if he doesn't, then yeah, we could approach the fire angle.
Okay, fantastic. And here I was thinking we didn't have a lot to talk about, but this was productive. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Keela. Thanks, everybody.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.